Hi, welcome. My name is Rachel Kimmer-Bussell. I'm editor-in-chief of Residence 11. You can find us at residence11.com. We're a website and community that celebrates sensuality, romance, intimacy, and loving in a new age of human connection. And today we're talking to Elizabeth Dell of Amorus about digital intimacy and sexting. I'll tell you a little bit about her before I start asking her questions. Elizabeth Dell, MPH, is a sex educator and founder of Amorus, a card game and iOS app for games with your lovers and friends. There is a multi-billion-dollar dating app business helping you find romance with strangers, but what helps you stay sexy with the person or persons that you've already found? Amorous' games and chat help you stay spicy and connected in your own private space. No strangers, no public profiles. And Amorous also has a new card game, Chat Sparks, which features 69 tantalizing questions for spicy discovery, whether on date night, a bachelorette, or sexy adult gathering. So make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're watching this so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming interviews. So Elizabeth, I'm definitely going to ask you about Amorous and about Chat Sparks, but first I want to go back a little in your life and ask you, what did you learn about sex growing up, whether at home, school, and or friends and pop culture?
Yeah, I learned a lot. I grew up in a household that was I don't know that the word sex positive was part of the language at that point, but certainly very education forward. My mother was a professor of reproductive health, specifically a professor of international maternal and child health, which is basically moms and babies. And so certainly the biology of sexuality was something that was taught. I had all the books, talking about sex for 3 to 5-year-olds and 5 to 7-year-olds and 7 to 9-year-olds. And I read ahead. And I was always the kid on the playground who would say, oh, no, 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 no. That's not how babies are made. Let me tell you how babies actually are made. So it was something that was, at least sort of in theory, really present in my life. I think my family's a pretty academic one, so it wasn't like sexuality as practiced was not so present, but definitely as like something that is shame-free and welcoming and part of your life and healthy and natural. I was really, really lucky to have that from the very beginning.
Definitely, because a lot of people I've talked to in the sexuality field had the opposite, where it was either not talked about at all, or there was shame or something like that. So how did you get involved in the sexuality world? Is that something you went to school for, or did you come to it later, like mid-career?
So in some ways I did go to school for it. I have a master's in public health, and I spent a lot of time studying kind of sexuality and intimacy as part of that. And then went away and kind of came back again via personal passion. So I actually, after doing a health education degree, I kind of pivoted and was a film producer for the better part of 15, 20 years, and spent a lot of time thinking about storytelling, thinking about how we tell stories to each other, how you tell a story to a large audience, how humans tell stories one-to-one, and had a real passion for passion at the same time. I've always been the friend who you can call up and talk to about the crazy sexy adventure or the like stressed out tension. I don't know if this is right. Am I not supposed to be thinking these things? Conversation. And I've always been interested in a wider view of sexuality and sensuality and romance than my peers. And I think it was a combination of that personal interest and then the pandemic leading me to find sort of new passions. And basically we can get into it, but Amorous was created because I needed a thing and I could not find it. And I was like, maybe more people need a thing. Maybe I should go make it for everybody. But that led me kind of back into intimacy and sexuality again, which is when I got my educator degree.
And what about technology? Because Amorous is an app, and you're a technology company. You also make physical products. But how did you get involved in that, and why did you want to create Amorous as an app versus some other format?
Yeah, well, So the kind of origin story of Amorus is that the pandemic started. We all went into our quarantine lockdowns. At the time, I was single and I had a few partners, none of whom I felt comfortable having inside my lockdown circle. Like they all had their own lives and their own circles, and I was doing all of my intimacy remotely, basically. And I'm also someone for whom intimacy and romance is a coping mechanism, right? That makes me feel better in times of anxiety. So I was leaning in pretty hard and was looking for ways to help make that experience better because I really wanted to be fun and delicious with my partner, but we were in a shared apocalypse, right? I was not my best self. I was not the most creative. I was not the most funny. I was like, how, let me get a little lift on this. And the initial thinking was not, I'm going to go become a tech entrepreneur in this space. It was, I'm going to go find a sexy game to do with one of my partners, and this will be fun. And I will not have to do all the creative lift to get delicious with them on my phone. Right? I will not have to think about all the scenarios. I will not have to discover. I will not have to ask a whole lot of questions and have them say no to a lot of stuff. We can just do this. This is the internet. It'll be great. I went and I asked the internet for this, and the internet said no. And I was shocked. I was like, wait, I just asked the internet for sex. Like, this is why we built it. How is it possible that the answer is no? And what I realized was that so much of intimacy and sexuality on available to us digitally is oriented around a solo journey. And that makes all the sense in the world. We are individually asking questions. We are individually looking for pleasure. But I wanted a two-player game. I wanted something that would engage me with the partner I already had, and I couldn't find it. And that sort of kicked off a big discovery and realizing, hey, this is a space that needs help. Like we have this huge tech business for finding strangers on your phone, right? That's dating apps. That's swiping right and left. But why is there nothing on my phone that helps me be delicious, helps me stay connected, helps me stay fiery with the partner I've already figured out I want to like get spine shivers from? And that was the birth of Amorous. That was what kind of kicked it all off. I had no idea how to make an app. I did know that I wanted it to feel private. Like this was a one-to-one connection. So I wanted it to be an app and not a website because I wanted it to feel intimate. I wanted it to feel really phone-based. But from there, I went and I had to find partners and I sort of built a terrible prototype on my own. And then I found a tech co-founder who was really excited to build this out with me. And that was the sort of beginning of the nascent journey of Amorous.
I mean, I think that makes perfect sense, especially during the pandemic when, whether you, even if like my partner and I lived together, so we were together pretty much 24/7, but I think especially for couples who maybe weren't as used to being together that often, I think a lot of people appreciate having sort of a preset guide to having some of those conversations because it could be hard to start them on your own and feel like, oh, like, am I the only one having this question or issue?
Mm-hmm.
I think just the nature of having something that is someone else made that has like questions, you're not alone in having those questions or thoughts. So,
and I think that so much of what's out there for couples tends to be oriented around trouble, right? It tends to be oriented around, hey, you guys are breaking, and how do we give you homework? How do we fix this? How do we make this better when you're already in a lot of trouble? And I really didn't want that. That wasn't where I felt I was with these partners. Wasn't the message that I wanted in the world. I just wanted help being delicious, right? I sometimes liken us to an activity app, like a meditation app or an exercise app. You don't go get Strava or go get Calm because you think you're bad at meditation. You go do it, or you're bad at riding a bicycle. You do it because you're like, I love this. I want to be better at this. I want all the tools at my disposal to be a ninja. And I wanted that. I wanted a thing that didn't come from shame, didn't come from breaking, didn't come from struggle, but was like, hey, how can we discover shared fantasies? How can we make it just a little bit easier to be sexy with each other? I want to look at my phone and get a thing and, go like this about someone sending me a message in a way that you do when it's a Tinder ping and you don't often do when it's an SMS text, even if it's your person, right? Because we put so much logistics in our sort of mainstreams. We put so much, who's picking up dinner and what are we doing? And like, what time do you want to leave to get to the airport? I wanted a thing that would just, even before I opened it, give me a little spice, because that's the thing that I want from that partner.
I like that a lot. So, well, can you give us a little overview of how the Amorus game and app work, and then
Mhm.
how does playing the game, using it, how does it create that space that we were just talking about to help people open up to talking about sex or other aspects of
Yeah.
intimacy and relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So Amorous is really oriented around feeling like a communication app, right? It feels a lot like a messaging app. You come on the app, you create a user, you send a private invitation to your partner. That can be a link that's a direct link to you. That's a one-to-one invitation. It can be a QR code that they scan if you are a couple that's in each other's presence and live together, or just get to go out and you're not long distance. And then you create a private space, and that private space is a conversation between you and, we call them flames, you and your flame, from which you can play a bunch of games, and it has all kinds of features to create private and safe spaces for intimacy. So for instance, we encrypt everything in sending and in sharing. We store in the cloud so that if you revoke permission for something, it revokes on both partners automatically, right? If I decide a week later, I don't actually want that picture in the world, I'm going to delete it, it'll delete from my side and from my flame side. We have screenshot alerts. So this is a place to have this kind of intimacy, but not to share outside that. But then that for me is the sort of floor, right? We have a whole lot of features you don't find elsewhere to create a safe and private space. But then building on that is our games. And so we have 3 games to start. Our first game is called Fantasy Swipe. It is kind of like it sounds. You get cards that have fantasies on them, a few every day. You say yes or no, I like this, I don't like that. Your partner does the same, and they're a little asynchronous, so you don't know who's seeing what when. But then when you match, it's fed to you in the chat. And so all of a sudden, you get this fun tile that says, you both think librarian student is kind of sexy. Who's going to have the overdue book, and what might be the penalty? There's a little prompt, and you're like, ooh. It's a way to kind of engage with fantasy, engage with desire from a hell yes, right? You're going to start from we both think this idea is really cool. How can we explore it? How can we talk about it? And here it is right in our chat. And now we can kind of message about, ooh, what if it was this? And what if it was that? Another game is called Jigsaw. Kind of like it sounds. You can send a picture to your person as a blurry puzzle that they have to solve before they get to see what you sent. And then the third game is called Chat Sparks, which is why our card game also has the same. And that's hundreds of conversation prompts. How do we spark a new conversation? And those can be questions like, what's a smell that always turns you on? If you had $50 to fulfill a fantasy, how would you spend it? Or some, and they go from mild to sort of spicy. They can be as mild as like, what's an ice cream flavor you never want to see in the world again? Anything like that but things where you push a button, both of you get asked that question, and it's a way to start a new like engage on a new idea without having to always be the creator of that, and also without having to ask the question, why is that question being asked? Because it's coming from the app, and if you don't like it, hit the button again, get another question.
I think that's great, and especially what you said about how in the fantasy swipe, if I get asked a question and I say no, and then my partner gets asked and says yes, they don't know that I said no, and I don't know that they said yes, right?
Nope,
That's
you do
really
not.
great because
Yeah.
that gives you that privacy and, like,
Mhm.
freedom to be honest. Because I almost think the longer you're together with someone, the more fraught some of these conversations can be, because if you're X number of years in and then all of a sudden they tell you about a fantasy, and then what if you think, "Well, why didn't you tell, like, you didn't feel comfortable telling me before?"
Mhm.
There's just so many things. I'm
Yeah.
not saying you shouldn't
No.
tell your partner, but I think that
No,
it can be
I agree completely.
share things. I think it's
Mhm.
easy to share things when you first meet someone because you're talking about this, that, and that, and you're sharing lots of different things. But once you feel like you know someone intimately, I think the stakes are higher, right? So I think it's
Mhm.
really cool that this can help people, whatever stage of the relationship they're in.
And I think, yeah, we have this sort of, it's okay in the beginning to have these conversations, to have discovery, but then there's sort of unspoken, all right, now we've figured it out and we're done. But we don't say that, like, we don't think that way about other things, right? We wouldn't look askance at our partner if they 10 years into the relationship were like, I want to learn how to play a guitar now. And 10 years ago I didn't have the free time, or I wasn't that intrigued by it. And then and then there was this long journey where I found a musician that I really liked, and they did a lot of solo guitar stuff, and then I listened to that for a few years, and then I was like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. Now I want to learn how to play guitar." I didn't want to learn how to play guitar 5 years ago.
I
That's
think,
allowed
yeah,
in a
I
way we don't do with sexuality.
definitely. I think a lot of partners are threatened when a partner says they want to try something, because I think they hear it not so much as, I want to play guitar, as, I want to play guitar and you're not playing guitar with me. Or, they
Mhm.
take it really personally, which to some
Mhm.
degree is natural. That's your partner or partners. I mean, it is personal, your relationship with them, but their interests are not always about you, which I think can also, I mean, it could be, but maybe they want to, I don't know what, like, go to a sex party. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they even want to sleep with someone else. They might just want to watch. And I think
Mhm.
people don't, there isn't
And
as much room to talk about those things, or people don't feel like there is. I think there probably is more room for that. Or people might surprise you, but I think it's
mhm.
really cool that you're giving people an opportunity to have these conversations without like the drama that can be inherent
Yeah.
when you say, "Oh, hey, let's sit down and have this serious conversation."
And I think the fantasy swipe game is really modeled on what BDSM uses, a yes, no, maybe list, where you'll kind of go through and say, this is a yes for me, this is a no for me, this is a maybe for me. The problem is that we, all of us as humans, focus on no's, right? Because no's tend to be the kind of thing that might kill you. Yeses don't kill you. No's is like, no, don't walk there. No, don't eat that. That's poisonous, right? We obsess about failure because failure is what saves our lives usually, right? And so what I really wanted to do was remove the ability to think about the no's, to get obsessed about, well, how, I said that I liked that thing and you said that you didn't, and why don't you like that thing? And maybe you just don't like that thing with me. And like, but maybe I'm weird for having liked that thing. I just didn't want that conversation. And so we built the game and the algorithm underneath it, all of it to be, hey, you just have to take it as it comes, say what you like, see what happens. Your partner's not seeing the same tiles you're seeing. So they'll get, we feed the positive swipes to the other partners to make sure that we can encourage matching, but you're just going to have to wait until something pops up for yes. But then you can sort of say, ooh, like, just, we both like this, we both want this, let's go explore this together.
That's really cool. This is not directly about Amorous, but in general, are there specific aspects of sex or relationships that you've found people have the most trouble talking about on their own or bringing up in conversation?
I mean, I think that people have, honestly, I think bringing up the conversation is honestly where the most difficulty lies. I think we, all of us, or most of us, get taught really, really early, like playground early, that the best response to sexuality, or the safest response, I should say, is disgust, right? If somebody shows up and is saying, oh my gosh, my older cousins were doing this crazy thing, If you're the kid who goes, ew, no one will ever point and laugh at you. If you're the one who leans in and asks all the questions, maybe you'll get called weird or a perv or something. And so really early, we get patterned way before we have conscious thought about it, that if somebody brings up sex, the first thing you should do is kind of shoulders up and lean back. And that's just, you're going to be safe if you do that, whether or not you actually want to do that in that moment. But then that's what you message in that moment to your partner is, oh, I'm retreating from this conversation. I don't want this conversation. This isn't good conversation. And that has an amplifying effect over time when it keeps happening. So I would say the hardest thing is to start the conversation and to try and remember not to instinctively judge just as a safety reaction, not to try and sort of keep the shoulders down, to be there and to just hear the person and not hear whatever judgment or whatever sort of meta emotions we put on things because of all of the baggage that society lays on sex. And kind of in that vein, one of the tips that I give, like the number one piece of advice I give people, whether it's digital intimacy or communication or anything, is asking questions. The best way you can communicate is asking questions. Better when that question leads from the thing before. I mean, if you're just always changing topics on someone, you're also messaging that you're not really listening. But when you ask a question, it is a fairly ninja form of communication because it says, I care about the other person. I care about your opinions. And that is the thing that all of us want in all communication. We want to be heard. We want to be seen. We want to be loved. And so if you're starting from curiosity, you're starting from, I would love to have this conversation with you. Would that feel good? I had a dream. Would you like to hear about it? I love that you like your neck kissed. Is there anything else I could do that would also feel that good? Or is there anywhere else on your neck you'd want to be kissed or stroked or tickled? When you ask questions, you engage people from a place of, I think you're important. And that's really powerful.
I agree. That's really interesting. You talked a little bit about Chat Sparks earlier, and that's in the app, but then that's also a physical card game. Can you talk about what sets Chat Sparks apart from other sex games and other maybe card games around intimacy that are on the market?
Yeah. Well, and I built Chat Sparks initially for the questions on the app, and then as I was out in the world with it, we put some of the questions on cards for marketing, and people loved it. They were like, "These are great questions. Can you make a deck?" And so we did. Here it is. That's the deck. And the thing that I did when pulling these questions, which in some way like led to some outcomes that I love but didn't expect, was I really wanted a game that did not make assumptions about its players. It did not assume that it knew what gender they were or what orientation, what sexuality, what age, what size, what appearance, what relationship structure. I really didn't want questions that assumed that the people playing had to be sleeping with each other, because maybe they weren't. Maybe it was a first opening date kind of sexiness, or maybe it was a group. And what I found was that that was a really unique feature on the market. Most of these games are designed very exclusively for a couple, not always for a heterosexual couple, but they're designed for two people who are intimate together. And they're really hard to bring into a group setting. They're harder to bring into a context where, like, we might be a bunch of adults who enjoy talking about sex and being sort of tantalizing and sparky together, but we're not actually going to sleep together. We just want to talk about sex. You know, my girls' boozy brunch, we're not looking to sleep together, but like we love talking about sex. And we ended up with a game that was really well designed for that because it had fun, interesting questions that a group could answer regardless of kind of who they wanted to or were thinking about sleeping with. The other thing that we really did was just like the app, I really come from a place of sort of positive intimacy. I didn't want the game to feel like therapy. This was something that should be a game. I wanted it to be delicious. I wanted the questions to make you giggle and make you think, and maybe think really interestingly about sex, but not activate shame, not activate judgment. And I think a lot of times they're really good, but many of the games on the market are more oriented around how can we encourage a couple to have a really important and deep and thoughtful and possibly somewhat triggering, depending on where people's issues are, conversation that needs to be had about intimacy and how they relate to each other. And that's really important, but that's not as fun. And I really wanted to make the game that was sort of the fun party night game, not the diving deep into sort of the emotional ramifications of our relationship with intimacy. And so that's kind of what ChatSparks is. I think I named a couple of the questions, but it's things like, what's the sexiest tattoo you've ever seen? Or what's the deepest underground you've ever had sex? Or if you were a sexual superhero, who would you be? They can trigger, or what's a desire or it's a fantasy that you never want in real life. They can trigger some really interesting conversations, but they are not going to ask you to expose your emotional wounds to your players if that's not where you want to be.
That's very cool. So what are you and Amorus working on next?
So we are working on, getting ChatSparks available in retail. So right now ChatSparks is available direct to consumer. So it's basically available from us directly. And we're working on making that accessible in more places than just our site. We're also bringing Amorus out into the world wider. So it's been really exciting to engage people with the app and grow. We have about 10,000 users and we're continuing to grow and grow and grow. I've got some new games that I'm planning, and then I'm also kind of expanding the games we already have, because inevitably our users get through a lot of the content, and then I'm expanding our fantasy list and I'm expanding our prompts and all of that all the time.
Very cool. And thank you to Amorus for sponsoring Desire Summit, which we just held on the 11th. Thank you so much. Where can people access Amorus, the app, and where can they get ChatSparks?
Mm-hmm. So you can get ChatSparks from our website. It's just chatsparks.com, and you can order the app there. Sorry, the game there. The app is available on iOS. It's currently free, and so it's only unfortunately available on iOS at the moment. We have plans to expand to Android, hopefully in this year, but we are starting out. So we were a one platform app to begin. So on iOS, you can just search for it in the App Store. It is Amorus. So slightly different spelling from the word as it's used in English. But yeah, find us in the App Store, and you can also find us on all the socials at Amorus app. So Amorus app is our socials everywhere.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm looking forward to using both of them myself, because I got very intrigued by what you were saying. And I think it's really cool that you can play ChatSparks with a partner or partners, but also with friends, because I think those are really important conversations to have with friends. I mean, the close friends, not maybe someone you just met, or maybe someone you just met. I don't know.
But a lot of times those close friend conversations, in fact, are the best, because that's a place where you can test out an idea that maybe you want to talk to your partner about, but you can get some group feedback of, hey, has anyone else had this conversation with their partner? And, what do you think about this? And I think we are all of us monkeys. And most of the time what we do is we look around at what everyone else is doing, and we're like, oh, I guess that's how you do it, whether it's riding a bicycle or how you buy groceries in a grocery store. And then we take this thing that is so important to so many of us, and we put it all behind a wall and say, no, this thing you don't get to watch other people do. And I understand that, but you don't get to model your behavior around other people. You don't get to see them do it right and do it wrong. You don't get to sort of expand your trial and error group by not having to make every mistake yourself. And a group of girlfriends is a great way to try that, and to sort of test out those conversations.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.